What's up, faithful? This is the 49ers Web Zone No Huddle podcast. We're part of the Odyssey Network. I'm Al Sacco with Brian Rennick.
What up?
Something about me that Brian knows, listeners may not. I hate doing preview shows. Not that I don't like talking about the game, but I just don't want to have 16, 17 shows, whatever, however many it is. Like, oh, this show, we're going to preview the game and we're going to do look at this and look at that. So we are going to do a little bit of a preview for the game because there is a game coming up. We'll talk about it, but I don't know. I've always been that way, Brian. Like, I just don't want to be like that cookie cutter, like, oh, it's a preview show. I'd like to do something different. So I put out a question on Twitter the other day. I just want to know where Niners fans' heads were and sort of what are your concerns? What are your questions? What are your thoughts? Not even just necessarily short term, but long term too. And I got a lot of responses. So I thought, since I don't just want to do a preview show, that would be a cool thing to do today. So we're going to do like a mailbag show. And we had some really good responses. So thank you everybody for coming through with that. And one of the first things we got, Bri, one of the first questions, concerns that came through,
I loved it. Yeah.
Was, is friend of the show, Lenoir Lenoir, are the 49ers going to re-sign him and when? And just a couple hours after that.
Yeah.
What happened? Huge contract, 5 years.
The answer is yes.
$92 million. Were you surprised by that contract? Is that about what you thought he would get?
I wasn't surprised by the size of the contract. I was surprised by when it happened. I actually tweeted out, I was like, holy shit, did I wake up in September of 2025? And, obviously tongue firmly planted in cheek, because, we've talked a lot about the 49ers and the difficulties they've had with these extensions. The biggest difference with Lenoir Lenoir is he was going to be an unrestricted free agent after this season, which meant that the 49ers, if they were going to re-sign him, had to do so before he hit free agency. Because I'll be perfectly honest, the contract that they gave him, I think if he hits the market, he makes more than that. Because it certainly feels like halfway through the season, he's well on his way to, at the very least, a Pro Bowl nom, if not an All-Pro 1 or All-Pro 2 type season. And so, one of the things that I think is a giant compliment from Kyle Shanahan today in his presser, they talked about the Lenoir Lenoir extension. And he said that Lenoir Lenoir and his mindset reminds him of Jimmy Ward. And I don't know if you remember, but when Kyle Shanahan was first hired, one of the things he said is, if I could wear a player's jersey, I would wear a Jimmy Ward jersey. Kyle Shanahan loved Jimmy Ward, his versatility. Ward could play inside, outside, and also safety. I think if they asked Lenoir to play safety, he probably could, and he'd probably do it well. But I think Lenoir's versatility, inside, outside, and just the mentality that he has. In fact, Derek Klassen, who is on the Athletics football show with Robert Mays, he tweeted a clip of Lenoir against the Bucs, and he said, if you don't have a nickel who can fit the run like this, and it shows the video, then you're cooked on defense. And it was Lenoir just hitting the hole as hard as he could and blowing up a running play. And, you usually don't think that with cornerbacks, but it's the type of mentality that he has. He's a bigger bodied guy, not necessarily tall, but a stout guy. And he just absolutely can blitz the passer. He can fit the run. He can play outside. He can play inside. It is a massive, massive contract for a player that is very, very important to this team. And I think he's earned every single penny.
With his versatility, he would have absolutely gotten paid because he can play the nickel. He can play outside. He can play the run. He's come up big in the playoffs with interceptions. He's proved that he's a clutch player. If you look at the yearly averages anyway for corners, he's got the 12th highest yearly average at 18.4. Into 13, it's a big drop. It's Carlton Davis with the Lions at 14.8. So there's a big drop between 12 and 13. The people ahead of him, Jalen Johnson, 19 million, L'Jarius Sneed, 19.1. Tyson Campbell of the Jags is a little over 19. Marshawn Lattimore, 19.4. Trayvon Diggs also 19.4. Marlon Humphrey, 19.5. And then you get into the 20 millions. Denzel Ward, AJ Terrell, Jair Alexander, Patrick Surtain, and Jalen Ramsey are all over 20 million. Surtain and Ramsey are at 24 million per year. So Lenoir would have absolutely gotten 20 million or north on the open market, especially if he did have an all-pro season. So it was a smart move by the Niners to get this done. And we've been bashing them, as have a lot of people, that they drag their feet with this stuff, but
yeah,
they identified him, they paid him. And another question that we got, again, this was before Lenoir even still, but are they going to be able to pay everybody? What is their salary cap going to look like? How are the Niners going to be able to
No, they
still field
won't.
the team? And I'm paraphrasing this
Yeah,
question, but
yeah,
paying all these people. Well, the answer to that is that they're going to be top heavy. They have the
mhm,
Purdy contract coming up, and Purdy's going to get paid. I don't know that he's going to get 60 million. Maybe he'll take less. Maybe he'll take 50 million. We'll see where they go with that. But he's going to make a lot of money. You have
mhm,
Brandon Ayuk making a lot of money. Fred Warner's still getting paid. Now you have Lenoir's contract. But what's going to happen is Ayuk and Purdy won't kill you next year. And we'll see. I haven't seen Lenoir's, the specifics of Lenoir's yet. I would assume it's probably backloaded too. The way that I see the Niners doing this is as Kittle and Debo and Williams and these guys fade out with the big numbers, that's when the big
yeah,
numbers will kick in for Purdy and Lenoir and Ayuk.
sure,
They'll
yeah,
figure out a way to do it. Prague is smart in terms of the money.
right,
They're going to be fine there. I'm not worried about that. The situation you may have is what we're kind of seeing right now is that they're top heavy. They do not have the depth that they had in the past because you got to pay your stars. And it's a good thing to pay your stars. It's a good thing to have a lot of dudes you got to pay. But as you pay them, you got to draft better and hope that you can have other guys step in and be good role players. So that's going to be, especially when you're paying your quarterback, it's different. You can't have the Avengers because you're paying your quarterback $2 million. You're going to have to start making some decisions. So I think that will happen as we go down the line.
yeah. A question we have in the chat says, is it true they cannot get rid of Slow-Mo, which I believe means Debo, next year after restructuring him? And the short answer to that is yes, simply because all they would do, yeah, and he just said in the chat, slow-mo equals Debo. So I did interpret that correctly. The short answer is no, they absolutely could get rid of him. But if they get rid of him, they're only going to save $1 million more than if he stayed on the team. So in reality, unless they're trading him for actual draft capital or something along those lines, or meaningful draft capital, then there's no reason for them to get rid of him, because with this restructure, there's no real savings in cutting him. So like I said, the short answer is no, but it is the NFL. There is an opportunity for them to, possibly trade him. But again, they're eating basically the entirety of his salary next year. They're saving $1 million. So unless it's, again, for meaningful, and by meaningful, I do mean like a second round pick, I don't think there's really any world where they get rid of him next year. But, one of the things that I thought was interesting is you said, like, how are the 49ers going to navigate all of these big contracts in the future? And the answer to that as well is through the draft, right? Drafting well, getting cheap, controllable talent. And I'll tell you what, the 2024 draft is a great, phenomenal first step for them in terms of what they've gotten out of that draft already this season. Because I don't know about you, but I did not expect the type of impact that the rookie class would have on this roster in 2024. But the fact that they've made a massive impact is just like, it is the icing on the cake, because now, because here's the thing, like, you think about that secondary, right? I was thinking about this today, thinking about the Lenoir contract and the ramifications it has on this roster. And the reality is, with Renardo Green stepping in and stepping up the way that he has, right, being incredibly impressive so far in his rookie year, also Malik Mustafa and also Jair Brown. Now, again, Brown, I think Mustafa's been a little bit better than Brown. I think there are some parts of Brown's game that still need some growth. But if you think about that secondary, you've got Diamador Lenoir, who's 26, and then you've got Renardo Green, who's a rookie, Jair Brown, who's a second-year player, and Malik Mustafa, who's a rookie as well. You've really got the future of your secondary with the oldest guy being 26 right now. That's huge. And then you've also got all of your skill players locked in for 2 to 3 more years in Debo, Ayuk, Pearsall, Kittle, CMC, all of them, right? What this allows this team to do, and I think we're gonna address this here in a little bit, but I think what you're gonna see in the draft this coming year is just a wholehearted focus on both sides of the line. which
I hope
getting
so.
all of these players allows them to do, right? Because you don't really need to go into the draft looking for help in the secondary, looking for help at the receiving, in the receiving core. Even Garendo and Jordan Mason really give you a young, backfield as well. Like, they are really set up with youth in the areas that aren't the lines, so that I think that their focus in upcoming draft is going to be offensive and defensive line to supplement what's already there and also prepare for the future, with Trent Williams and hopefully a center as well.
And they have to keep Debo anyway, because Ayuk is not. I'd be shocked if Ayuk is ready to start the season. I mean, I'm not planning to see Brandon.
Oh, he's
Ayuk
not
until
going to be ready
halfway through the season. There's no way. So you're gonna need Debo next year. You're gonna need Pearsall, who's off to a really good start. You're still gonna need Juwan Jennings, who has another year on his deal. You're gonna need those guys again next year. And Kittle, obviously, Kittle is the best tight end in the league right now, but he's not getting any younger. But McCaffrey is not getting any younger. So those guys are all going to be there next year. But like you said, they really have to concentrate on the lines. Now, the signing of Lenoir, and especially how much he got. Now, what about these other free agents? Ward, Greenlaw, Banks, Huff. I did see a rumor floating around that Banks, they said, was a priority. I don't know if it's true or not. It kind of surprises me if he is. I don't think they're going to give him a lot of money. It would be pretty stupid to give an average guard a big contract. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. But Huff has played his last down with the Niners. We'll see what Greenlaw looks like when he gets back, but somebody's going to offer Greenlaw a lot of money. If he's healthy, he will make a shit ton of money in the open market. And Ward too, obviously we're thinking about him and his family, and that there's more important things in football. But when he does come back, he'll make a lot of money in the open market as well when he gets there. Yep. So those are guys that are going to be tough to bring back. So you have to have, like you said, Mustafa, and Puni plays on the other side, but they did bring in a young guard on the other side of Banks who can play. And you mentioned Renardo Green, but linebacker is a big question mark. So if Greenlaw doesn't come back, they do have to figure something out there as well. So we'll see it. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, decisions to make for the Niners. They have to draft well. This year was a great start because it looks like they got a lot of players in this draft, but they're going to have to continue to do that, because as you pay these other guys and as you pay a quarterback, you can't afford to have all these stars all over the place. So we'll have to see how that goes. Numerous questions / comments that I got on this have to do with Kyle Shanahan. A lot of people are losing patience with him, just in terms of, I don't want to even say losing patience. I guess it's frustration. There's some frustration with him. Two of the things that were said a couple of times. The first was him not addressing special teams, which we've talked about ad nauseum, but we'll talk about it again. The second, and this is fair. I think I'm going to lead with this. A number of fans asked the question in different ways. Is he ever going to be able to close? Why can't this team close games? Why are they having trouble closing games this season? And why can't they ever win the Super Bowl? Now, fair or not to Kyle, Kyle gets the blame for 3 Super Bowl losses. He gets more blame than Dan Quinn does, which isn't really fair, but for the Falcons loss. And he was calling the plays, and he did call some, if you just run the ball on 3rd and 1, you won the Super Bowl probably. So he does get stuff there. And then he obviously, for the 2 Niners losses, and he's known, maybe it's the Niners fans, but the first thing you see from a lot of other people is, it's a 10-point lead. Kyle's going to choke that away. So it's fair to me in the sense that, is Kyle Shanahan a bad coach? Absolutely not. Look around the league at some of the terrible coaches that there are. Kyle would get a job in a second if he was in the open market. A second. He wouldn't be unemployed for literally 1 second on the open market. But every coach, eventually, if you don't win championships, you just reach a point where it's just kind of run its
plateau.
Right. Just kind of, and I don't believe that we're there with Kyle yet. I'm not saying that, but some fans are starting to ask the question, well, if we're just doing this over and over again, at what point does it make it? Again, I don't know who you would move to, but Andy Reid's a good example. So Andy Reid did a lot of what Kyle Shanahan is doing now, where he just won every year, got to the NFC Championship game every year. He lost 1 Super Bowl. Kyle's lost 2. He wasn't going anywhere, but then he had a couple bad years. And it kind of gave Philly to say, okay, it's not that Andy Reid's a bad coach. This has just run its course here. And what happened after Andy Reid left? Well, he goes to the Chiefs. He's very successful with Alex Smith, and then he gets an all-world quarterback, and it looks like they're never going to lose again for the rest of eternity as long as these two are together. So that's the fear with Kyle. For, I guess, be careful what you wish for. Yeah, can he reach his plateau? Can he plateau here? Can you go as far as he's going to take you here? Sure, that can happen. If you go a couple more years and he hasn't won a Super Bowl, and you're like, all right, well, what are we doing here? But be prepared if that happens. If he goes somewhere else, he's still going to be a very successful coach. So be careful I understand the frustration, but be careful what you wish for there.
Yeah, and you brought up Andy Reid, and I feel like that's really the best example, at least in the modern NFL. But he was in Philadelphia for 14 years, and his record was 130, 93, and 1. And he led the Eagles to the playoffs 9 times. They appeared in 1 Super Bowl, but there was a stretch where they made 3 straight NFC Championship games, very similar to Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan just has one up on him, is in that he made the Super Bowl. He's made the Super Bowl twice now. But at a certain point, sometimes things get stale, especially if you're not winning, right? And I think as a fan of the 49ers, right, my biggest fear is that, much like Andy Reid and even Bill Belichick, right, like Kyle Shanahan's second stop is going to be the one where he finds the most success, which obviously means that wouldn't be with the 49ers. And to me, that is my biggest fear, but also like what am I going to do about it? Like, do I want Kyle Shanahan to not be the coach of the 49ers anymore? Absolutely not. There's maybe one guy in the NFL that would become available to be a coach where I would be like, maybe, but again, it's a huge gamble, and that would be Ben Johnson, right? Just based on the offense that he's running in Detroit. He does seem like a pretty a pretty impressive offensive minded head coach. And to me, that is, in the NFL today, I think that's what you have to go with. As much as I love DeMeco Ryans, right? Like, he's always going to be beholden to whoever he brings in to run his offense. And if he doesn't bring in the right guy, right, it doesn't matter how impressive he is, unless you're Mike Tomlin, right? Who, for like the amount of shitty offensive coordinators that he has brought into Pittsburgh over his tenure, still manages to win, still manages to stay 500 or above every single season, is just wildly impressive. But yeah, if you get rid of Kyle Shanahan, you can't go to like a defensive minded head coach. I just don't think that this is the team of Bill Walsh. This is the team now of Jim Harbaugh, of Kyle Shanahan, right? Like, even, Seifert obviously won a Super Bowl, but you don't think about him as the head coach. You just think about the offense that was put in place by Bill Walsh, and then he kind of rode those coattails, if you will. But every coach that you think about in the lore of the 49ers, it's Walsh. It's, even Mariucci to a certain extent, it's Harbaugh, and then it's Shanahan. And so I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know how to answer, can he finish? Will he finish? I don't know. I don't even really know how to analyze why he has such difficulty in finishing. And there's so many things that you could point to. And like we said, I think last episode, you could argue that it's special teams that cost them the Super Bowl last time. And so
it was part of it, certainly a part of it.
Right. And so, maybe that is part of it. Maybe at a certain point, Kyle Shanahan finally stops saying, listen, I just don't want special teams to lose us a game. And it's like, well, but that's what they're doing. Like, they've been doing that for you. So if that's your philosophy, you're not even succeeding in that philosophy, because they are losing you games. They've lost you games this year. They've lost you games in the past. You could argue they lost you a Super Bowl last year, right? Like, obviously that's not the only thing, but if your philosophy is just don't lose me the game, you're not even succeeding there. So you got to get a different philosophy. And so we've said it before, the special teams isn't going to get better until Kyle Shanahan gives a shit about it. And I don't know what it's going to take for him to do that. It certainly seems like he's just too stubborn to do it. I don't know. But at a certain point, he's going to have to figure it out, because it is literally keeping him from achieving his goal, which obviously is to win a Super Bowl.
Well, like you said, it's cost him, and in the sense of him not being able to close, and there's a lot of the people, I think there were 34, 35 questions on here, and a number of them had to do with Kyle Shanahan closing out games. He didn't close out the Super Bowl, and it's gone into this year where there's really been four that I'm thinking off the top of my head. You lose the Rams, you lose the Cardinals. The Seahawks got back into it. In this last game against the Bucs, again, they did end up winning at the end, but again, they made it as difficult as possible. That's going to catch up to you at some point. So the special teams has played a part in all of that. So that's a big part of it. Kyle is a very stubborn guy. And listen, I'd rather have stubborn Kyle than probably 28 other head coaches or whatever it is, right? Like, I still would rather have that guy, but he has flaws. Everybody has flaws. And I feel like Kyle's big flaw is that he's kind of stubborn. He's stuck in his ways, and with the special teams, he's just kind of got just don't lose us the game. But it is losing you the game.
Right.
So you may just want to, field the kick and go to the next thing, but that's not happening. It's not happening.
Yeah.
It's hurting you on both sides on the return game and when you're defending the return. Moody's missing some kicks now. So it is hurting you. So at some point he has to change. He has to look in the mirror and say, you know what? I don't love doing this, but it's hurting me. I have to do something else about special teams, whether they prioritize certain players, whether they get a new coach, which I think they certainly will in the offseason. They just signed that guy who was on the Giants. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. But he's a good special teams player. I don't even know if he probably won't be on the practice squad. I cannot think of his name. I'm so sorry.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I will.
But again, nobody who's going to make like a huge difference, but he was just somebody who was available, and he had been a good special teams player for the Giants. And he'll probably go on the practice squad or whatever, I would assume. So maybe that's a step in the right direction. I think Brian has a look on his face like he's looking up the name right now, which I should have done before I brought it up, but I didn't.
Yeah, I was trying to find it right now. Everything is all about Diamador Lenoir.
Yeah, if we can't think of it, I'll mention his name next show. But so again, maybe that's like a small baby step to being like, hey, let's find somebody on the scrap heap who is at least a pretty good special teams player. Because they do have to address it. But Kyle's not going anywhere anytime soon. No, I mean, this is his 8th year. He'd have to have 3 or 4 more years, I think, of really some pretty shady results before the Niners would move on. I think he's got enough coin in the bank where he's going to stay around for a while, and he should. Again.
Yeah,
look at some of the coaches around this league.
And speaking of special teams moves, they also signed a punter to the practice squad today because Mitch Wisnowski is having a flare up with some back issues. So again, it just, for whatever reason, these specialists cannot seem to catch a break this season with the 49ers when it comes to injuries. Obviously, first Jake Moody and now Wisnowski, which this is an issue Wisnowski had in the preseason, which is why they had Presley Harvin, who looked really good in the preseason, and then he ended up signing, I can't remember with who, so he wasn't available. So the 49ers signed this guy. Who apparently, according to Grant Cohn, sat next to Grant on the flight from Tampa Bay back to San Francisco when Grant Cohn came back. So
the punter,
interesting. Yeah,
that's
literally
really
sat
funny.
next to him on the plane. So that was an interesting little tidbit from him. But yeah, like I said, I mean, at this point, like you said. I don't think he's going to make a move mid-season. So it is what it is at this point. And you just have to hope that, some of it is execution and some of it, is, I don't know. I don't know if it's scheme. I don't know, it's hard to know with some of this, without obviously being in the building, why it has been so poor this year, because it has been objectively worse than in seasons past. It hasn't been this bad before. It's been bad. It hasn't been this bad before. It's really, really bad.
It's atrocious.
In fact, the 49ers are ranked 3rd in DVOA on offense, 5th on defense, and 31st on special teams. Like, that is just the biggest disparity, right?
Like it's make fun of you bad.
If you're
it's that bad.
Even if you were 16th, right? If they were 16th, they're probably, I don't know, 7-2 now instead of 5-4. So, yeah, you just got to hope it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see it. I don't see there being changes to make it better. You just got to hope as a fan, you just got to cross your fingers and hope at this point.
Well, the dude they signed from the Giants was Nick McLeod, who I'm sure nobody has heard of ever. No, that's not true. There's somebody on Twitter who loved Nick McLeod in the draft. I'm sure.
Well, there you
they
go.
posted that. You know, unbelievable. Anyway,
there's always one person.
There's always somebody, right? Like, oh, Nick McLeod, great signing. I remember when he was in the draft.
Yeah.
I loved him. Anyway, they got rid of Adrian Amos and they signed Nick McLeod to the practice squad, and he played 116 special teams snaps with the Giants this year.
Okay.
That's all I know. So brought in a special teams player. So, we'll see how it goes. This is going to keep coming up this season, and hopefully it doesn't bite them in the ass more than it already has, but it probably will. All right. Also, multiple questions about the offensive line.
Yeah.
And the concern with the offensive line essentially is that what is the long-term plan there? Trent Williams, 36 years old. You never know at that age, right? They didn't address tackle this season. You got McGlinchey on the other side. Jake Brendel is 32 and not playing well at center.
McKivitz on the other side.
McKivitz, sorry. Who did I say?
McGlinchey.
Oh, okay. Freudian slip there. McKivitz on the other side. McKivitz, it sounds the same. And then Brendel, 32, who's I think everybody and their mother wants to replace him. Aaron Banks, who, again, I didn't think he was going to be there next year. We'll see how much merit there is to this report that the Niners want to re-sign him. But the start that makes me feel good is the draft pick of Dominic Puni. Maybe that is the start of them in the next couple of drafts really starting to prioritize the line. They picked him in the 3rd round. He's been phenomenal this season. So it is a higher draft pick for them at guard. He's been terrific in pass protection. He looks like he's going to be a future Pro Bowler. He's been that good. So that's a good start. But I do agree with that. Center is a huge position, and you have a big hole there. And John Feliciano is not your answer. John Feliciano is also in his 30s. He's on a 1-year deal. He's not a long-term answer there. If he was the answer, he'd be playing there right now. So they have to address center, and eventually, I think you got to get better at right tackle. You have to, and you have to bring somebody in there who's eventually going to be able to take over for Trent Williams. I don't like the idea of, okay, Trent Williams is going to retire this year. We'll figure it out now this offseason. I like them bringing in somebody, and even if you start him at right tackle and you're going to move him to left tackle, I do want to see them bring in someone to eventually take over for Trent.
Yeah, and I mean, at 36 years old, the reality is you're one devastating injury away from it being over. And right now, if that happened, Jalen Moore would be the starting left tackle for the 49ers, which obviously would not be ideal. Dominic Puni is, I mean, at this point with how well he's played at right guard, I'm sure you don't really want to mess with what's been really, really good, but he played left tackle at Kansas. And he doesn't have quite the length that sometimes you would like at tackle, but he does have the experience there. I wonder if part of it is maybe they would look to him. But again, like I said, but if you take from there, then you subtract, and you make that spot worse. So I don't know, but I think the problem for the 49ers when it comes to finding an heir apparent for Trent Williams is when you're consistently drafting in the bottom 3rd of the 1st round, the majority of the guys that, come in and start right away and end up being all pros and whatnot, you tend to find them early in the 1st round, right? There's always runs on tackles. And so then it becomes more of a crapshoot, right? At the end of the 1st round, into the 2nd, into the 3rd, you're getting guys that have warts, right? Like you're getting guys that maybe have the size and testing that you like, but on film they don't show the consistency, or maybe they're really consistent on film, but they don't have the size that you normally would covet, right? Like Trent Williams was a top 10 pick. It's not like he was, a 2nd or 3rd round pick, or he was a top 10 pick for a reason, right? He's one of one. He's a freak, but I think that's the biggest issue. And, it's interesting. There were a lot of people, including myself, who were a little surprised that the 49ers went with a guy like Ricky Pearsall versus like a Kingsley Suamataia, who was the tackle out of BYU that the Chiefs ended up taking. In the, I can't remember what round they took him in, but I think it was
right before Green.
Yes, that's right. Right
Yeah.
before Renardo Green. Oh, that's right. They traded back with the
Mm-hmm.
Chiefs,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Chiefs took Sumatia, and everyone was like, "Why are we helping the Chiefs?" But apparently, he's been a bit of a disaster there. And so again, it just kind of goes to show that even the guys that you like in the draft may not pan out the way that you want. And so
Most
I think
don't.
the biggest issue for them when it comes to finding a guy to replace Trent Williams is they're not typically available when the 49ers are drafting. And so it'll be interesting to see how they address that. Again, is it a second round pick that you don't necessarily bring in to play right tackle? Maybe you bring them in and just develop them for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Let them learn from literally arguably the best to ever do it, whatever the case may be. But there aren't any ready-made solutions for replacing Trent Williams. And 49er fans also have to be ready that whoever does replace Trent Williams is a massive downgrade, obviously. And so that's where you hope that you build up strength somewhere else, maybe the interior, so that, again, you're not just relying on hoping that whoever you bring in to replace Trent Williams, whether it be because of injury, retirement, whatever, that you're not getting the same performance. And so it'll be interesting to see how they handle it.
Yeah, 49ers fans got spoiled going from Staley to Williams. Don't get used to that. I can't see that kind of transition happening
Right.
again.
Yeah. No.
All right,
Unless
Bri.
there's a team that is willing to give away a Hall of Fame talent for very little because they're disgruntled and pissed off at their at their current team. Never know.
Yeah, they got pretty lucky that we were able to get Williams.
Oh, hugely lucky.
I
Yeah.
mean, will you take it? But all right, transitioning to this week. This is a gigantic game, huge game in the NFC West, which is very competitive at the moment. The Seahawks risk really falling out of it if they lose this game. So they're going to be coming. They're coming off a bye. They're going to be coming at the Niners with everything that they have. But they've had a really tough time beating the 49ers in this Geno Smith era. Geno's 0-5 against the Niners, and Drew Lock also lost a game starting for Geno in that time. So they're 0-6 because I'm counting the playoff game in there. Since Russ left, counting the playoff game. And Geno's got 5 picks in those games. He has not looked good. The Niners have kind of owned him. Seattle's defense has been bad. But is this just kind of a kitchen sink game coming off the bye? That is the fear. It's also a gigantic game for the 49ers. Because 49ers, God forbid, lose this game. Following here, they're at Green Bay, at Buffalo, Bears at home, Rams at home, at Miami, Lions at home, Cardinals at home. 4 of those games are going to be really, really difficult. The Packers, the Bills, that is a brutal back-to-back.
Yeah.
And the Bills are coming off a bye. The Rams are always going to be tough to play. And then the Lions, the Cardinals to end the season. Lions want to kick your ass, and the Lions are the best team in the NFL, I think, right now. And the Cardinals look for real, and that game could be for the division. It really could be. So that's a big game. So this isn't going to be a second half of the season. At least it doesn't appear to me, where the Niners are cruising and they're 10-2 or whatever it is, and you're just like, we're good. They're going to need a lot of these wins, and it starts this week. Seahawks isn't a game maybe you're not circling with some of those marquee matchups coming up, but it is a gigantic game for the Niners.
Yeah, and what's the most interesting to me is that when they went up to Seattle on Thursday night and beat the Seahawks, largely it was on the back of a dominant run game. They just ran all over the Seahawks. There just wasn't really anything that they could do to stop it, and that was without Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, McCaffrey is back, although the run game looked pretty bad against the Bucs. I really think
way for sure.
Yeah, I think the Bucs sold out to stop the run, and I'll be interested to see if the Seahawks do as well. And that's where, again, perhaps the game rests on the right arm of Brock Purdy, with his host of compliments in the passing game. I just picked up in one of my just random ESPN leagues. Obviously, again, they're random leagues, right? So it's not necessarily always against people who really want to play or know what they're doing. So I went on to waivers just because I needed a wide receiver, and Juwan Jennings was there. I was like, I'm absolutely picking up Juwan Jennings. I think Juwan Jennings could have another huge game. Again, 11 targets against the Bucs in that X wide receiver role. So it'll be interesting to see if the offensive game plan shifts, because Seattle's defensive game plan shifts, in which they just sell out to stop the run. As Steve-O in the chat said, Seattle just cut their leading tackler, which is an interesting, an interesting development. Coming off a bye, not sure what they're doing there, but
I don't know enough about the Seahawks to have any idea what's going on with that.
But you're right. Like the Seahawks defense has been pretty bad all season. I anticipate the 49ers are going to be able to move the ball on them pretty easily. The question is DK Metcalf going to be back? And is that Seattle offense going to find a way, which they haven't over the past 6 games against these 49ers, to move the ball enough to keep pace? I don't think that they will. I think the 49ers will be able to get enough pressure on Geno that I imagine there's going to be at least one turnover from him, just because that's been a consistent theme. And, I think the 49ers, especially with it being at home, I think they'll find a way to get it done. I don't think they'll overlook this team. Again, this is a 49ers team that is locked in the second half of the season, and it started last week. Obviously, they almost lost that game. I understand.
Yeah, I don't know that I call last week locked in.
But they still won. They still won, right? They still won. And a win is a win. And as Fred Warner said, that can be a character builder. Again, it's week to week, and I think this team is veteran laden enough and experienced enough to be able to lock in week to week and not look ahead at Green Bay, not look ahead at Buffalo, and just concentrate on the task at hand.
Metcalf practiced today, which we're recording on a Wednesday. He practiced in a limited fashion today. He looks like he's going to be back. The last time they played, Seattle really looked like they wanted to run on the Niners. They were committed to handing the ball off, and the Niners shut it down. So I'll be very interested to see how they come out in this game and how they try to attack, because Geno's looked he's been shook against them. It seems like every time he plays. And Geno has not had a good season. He's put up a lot of yards, but he hasn't had a good season. He's had a lot of trouble throwing touchdown passes in the red zone. Some of the yards are in garbage time. So he hasn't been terrific. The Seattle team is really finding their way, and they're at the Niners. And then they have Arizona, the Jets, Arizona, Green Bay, Minnesota, Chicago, and the Rams. If they lose this game, they're likely done. Even if they split with Arizona, that's 6 losses. If they lose the Niners, 7 with Arizona, they lose to Green Bay, say they lose to Minnesota, they're looking at 8 or 9 losses.
Yeah.
Maybe at best. I don't see them. They may even finish in last place, actually. I think they probably will. Although the way the Rams played on Monday, I don't know what the hell was going on there. The Rams were really looking good. And then they brought in their starting offensive lineman back, and they just couldn't get anything done.
Yeah, that was weird.
Stafford, this is where with the quarterback stuff, I'm not going to get on a Purdy rant, but I wonder if people watch other games. Stafford played like shit on Monday night. He did not play well at all.
Yep.
It's Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford's a terrific quarterback. He had a bad week. Nobody's out screaming from a soapbox like, oh my God, Stafford's done. But anyway, they didn't look good. They had a million chances to win that game, and they just kept shooting themselves in the foot over and over again. But the Rams still have a very favorable schedule going down the stretch. They play New England. They play the Saints. They play the Jets. So then they play the Seahawks again. So that could be like 4 more wins for them. And then it depends on what they do elsewhere. But they can get to 9 wins. Arizona is the team that you have to watch, though. I don't know what to make of them, but they look like they might be pretty good. But regardless, huge game for the Niners.
Speaking of, before we end here, you said you don't want to get on a Purdy soapbox. One thing that I saw today that I thought was interesting, and it made me, I don't know the answer to this question, but I thought it was interesting. And Grant Cohn tweeted it out, and what he said was, it feels like, what did he say? He said, it feels like Kyle Shanahan is, hold on, I'm going to find it real quick. Said, it feels like Kyle Shanahan is, where'd it go? There it is. It feels like Kyle Shanahan wants to evaluate Brock Purdy with the training wheels off before paying him big bucks.
Oh, and, I don't agree with that.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that we've talked about multiple games is thinking what we knew the game plan would be going into the game, and then after the game going, that game plan was weird, right? Like it was very pass heavy or whatever the case may be. And it was like, oh, that's interesting. And, one of the things that we've also talked about is, the lack of play action that we've seen this season, which had been a staple for quite a few seasons. And sometimes the lack of being under center, and like it has felt a little bit like I'm not saying I don't think he means that in a bad way, right? I don't think he means like he's putting him in adverse situations to see how he responds. I don't think he would do that. But I do think that there's a part of him that's like, we need to know, right? If we go into a game and our running game gets shut down, can Brock Purdy carry us? Can we? And I think he's answered the bell. I really do. I don't think, I think quietly Brock Purdy's having a really good season. The touchdown numbers aren't there. The interception numbers are up a little bit. But then you look at games like last week where, it early in the game, first couple of drives, right, look a little shaky, but then absolutely has command of the offense from the rest of the time. And then, you get that opportunity to drive down to field goal range, and he doesn't throw an incompletion. Every throw is an absolute dot. Every throw is exactly where it needs to be. Even that throw to Juwan Jennings, he puts it in a place that allows Jennings to then get those extra yards, because it's not just in his body, it's out in front of him. So he catches it so that he can stop and then come back around, and he got those extra yards. And again, literally every inch he got was needed, because that ball almost hit the uprights.
But I don't think Kyle's coaching in a way he's not going to hurt the team. Like, he may mix a couple things here and there that he wants to see, or because I think he trusts Purdy more. He trusts Purdy to be a drop back passer more than he would Garoppolo or whatever. But you always say Brock Purdy plays for the 49ers. He plays for Kyle Shanahan. So who gives a shit how he fits in any other system? But it has been weird. Kyle's play calls have been weird, but I don't think he's trying to find any, not in that way anyway.
Yeah. Sure, and like I said, I don't think it's Kyle putting that, like I said, in adverse situations or situations that would hurt the team, but just sometimes like, hey, let's see, if he's choosing between two plays that he thinks both will be successful, but one is a run and one is a pass. Hey, why don't we throw the pass, see what Purdy can do for us or whatever. Again, I have no idea, but I just thought that was interesting to just think about, like, this team is still evaluating Brock Purdy because they have to, right? Like, I mean, I think, and you think that he's shown enough that you're ready to commit to him, and I agree, but I mean, what if for the last 7 games of the season the wheels fall off and he just looks like garbage? I don't anticipate that happening, but you can't be committed right now, right? You still got to play the season out and see how things go, but I do think, like you said, I agree. I think he trusts Brock Purdy more than he's trusted a quarterback ever, besides Matt Ryan, or at least in San Francisco. And I think he is more willing to open things up a little bit because he believes that Brock Purdy can succeed. And largely, I think Brock Purdy has proven him right.
100%. All right, everybody. Thanks again for the questions. Like, subscribe. Oh, we gotta give a score. We gotta do the scores.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna probably guess the same score because we always do. The offense is gonna be better. We're gonna finish a little bit this week. Seattle will score some points too. 34-21 Niners.
Excellent, because I was going to say 33-20. So
all right,
we were pretty close. Yep. I like it.
All right. We'll be back again. Like, subscribe. Thank you for listening. I'm Al. He's Brian.
Later.